Good evening, everyone. Let's start with a question. How many of us have ever felt stuck in a pattern of behavior, knowing it's not working but unsure how to change it? Relationships, whether romantic, familial, or platonic, can feel like the most complicated, rewarding, and frustrating part of life all at once. Today, I want to share 9 things women should avoid doing with men, not as a rule book, but as a guide for fostering connection. Respect and growth. Let's unpack this because it's one of the most common dynamics in relationships, and it's often born from a place of love. You meet someone, you see their potential. You think to yourself, if they could just work on this one thing, they'd be perfect. Maybe it's a habit, a personality trait, or the way they approach their goals. You don't see it as a bad thing, you see it as wanting the best for them. But here's the truth: trying to change someone almost always backfires. When we try to change someone, even with the best intentions, what we're really saying is, you're not enough as you are, and whether we say those words out loud or not, they land. Over time, it chips away at trust and self-esteem. The person might start to feel like they're in a relationship not for who they are, but for who you hope they can become. Here's an analogy. Imagine you walk into a room and someone hands you a beautiful gift. It's wrapped perfectly. You open it and they say, "This is for you," but only if you tweak it a bit. Suddenly, the joy of receiving that gift is gone. That's what it feels like when someone loves you, but with conditions. Now, let's be clear, this doesn't mean we shouldn't support growth in our partners. Growth is essential in any relationship, but there's a huge difference between supporting someone and trying to fix or mold them. Supporting growth means meeting them where they are, recognizing their strengths, and encouraging them to reach their goals in their own time and way. It's about cheering them on, not pushing them into a version of themselves they didn't choose. Think about the moments in your life when you've truly grown. Were you motivated because someone was nagging you or pointing out your flaws? Probably not. Real change happens when we feel safe, valued, and empowered, not judged or pressured. It's also worth asking yourself this: why do you feel the need to change him? Sometimes the answer reveals something deeper. Are you projecting your own insecurities? Are you trying to fill a gap in your life by reshaping someone else? Taking a step back to reflect on your motives can be incredibly freeing. And here's another truth: when you spend your energy trying to change someone, you might miss out on seeing who they truly are. You might miss the beauty in their quirks, the lessons they bring, and the unique way they navigate the world. Relationships aren't about perfection, they're about connection. If there are deal breakers, things that truly don't align with your values or needs, it's okay to acknowledge that. It's okay to decide that the relationship isn't right for you, but don't try to force a square peg into a round hole. Letting go of the need to change someone allows you to focus on what really matters: building a relationship based on mutual respect, acceptance, and growth. The most loving thing you can do is to accept someone as they are while giving them the freedom to grow into whoever they're meant to be. And remember, that's exactly what you deserve in return. Boundaries are the invisible lines that define where one person ends and another begins. They're not about keeping people out, they're about creating a safe and respectful space for connection. In relationships, boundaries are essential because they protect individual autonomy while fostering mutual understanding. When we respect boundaries, we create a foundation of trust. When we don't, we risk undermining the very connection we're trying to build. So what does respecting boundaries really mean? It starts with understanding that everyone has different comfort levels, needs, and limits. These might relate to time, physical affection, communication, or personal space. Boundaries are not about rejection, they're about self-care. When someone sets a boundary, they're saying, "This is what I need to feel safe, secure, and respected." The importance of listening. One of the most fundamental ways to respect boundaries is by listening, really listening. When a man expresses his needs or discomfort, it's essential to take those words seriously. For example, if he says he needs time alone to recharge, it's not about you, it's about what he needs to be his best self. Instead of taking it personally, consider how respecting that boundary can actually strengthen your relationship. Listening isn't just about hearing the words, it's about understanding the intention behind them. It's about asking questions like, what does that mean for you? Or how can I support that boundary? This kind of curiosity builds deeper understanding and shows that you value his individuality. Boundaries are not personal. Sometimes it's easy to feel hurt or rejected when someone sets a boundary, especially if it doesn't align with your expectations. But it's important to remember that boundaries are not about you, they're about the other person. They're not a reflection of how much they care for you, but of how much they care for themselves. Healthy relationships require two people who feel secure enough to advocate for their own needs without guilt or fear. Recognize the consequences of ignoring boundaries. When boundaries are ignored, it sends a message that someone's feelings and needs don't matter. Over time, this can lead to resentment, frustration, and emotional distance. A relationship where one person feels unheard or disrespected is a relationship that's likely to struggle. By honoring boundaries, you communicate respect, which deepens trust and connection. The physical and emotional boundaries. Boundaries exist in both physical and emotional spaces. Physical boundaries might include preferences around touch, personal space, or intimacy. Emotional boundaries involve the thoughts, feelings, and vulnerabilities that someone chooses to share or not share. Respecting emotional boundaries means not pushing someone to open up before they're ready and not using their vulnerabilities against them. Communicating your own boundaries. Respecting boundaries is a two-way street. It's just as important to communicate your own needs clearly and confidently. When you set boundaries, you're modeling healthy behavior. For example, if you need time to process your emotions, let your partner know. By setting boundaries without guilt or anger, you make it easier for him to do the same. Boundaries strengthen relationships. Here's the paradox: while boundaries might seem like barriers, they're actually bridges. They create clarity and reduce misunderstandings. When boundaries are respected, both partners feel valued and safe, which fosters deeper intimacy. Consider this: how would you feel if your partner consistently honored your needs without question? Wouldn't that create a sense of trust, care, and mutual respect? The same is true in reverse. Respecting his boundaries doesn't just benefit him, it benefits the relationship as a whole. Practical ways to respect boundaries. Ask, don't assume. If you're unsure about someone's preferences, ask. Simple questions like, is this okay with you, or how do you feel about this? Show respect and openness. Accept no gracefully. If someone declines or sets a limit, honor it without pushing back. Be mindful of patterns. Notice what he consistently expresses as important to him, and make an effort to respect those preferences. Check in regularly. Boundaries can change over time. Periodic conversations about comfort levels and needs help keep the relationship healthy. Closing thought. Respecting boundaries isn't about rules, it's about care. It's about showing someone that you value who they are and what they need, just as they are. When we respect boundaries, we're saying, I see you, I hear you, and I honor you. And isn't that what we all want in a relationship? In any relationship, whether romantic, familial, or platonic, emotions are the glue that binds us together. Emotions are our inner compass, guiding us to understand ourselves, each other, and the world around us. Yet, far too often, there's a tendency, whether conscious or unconscious, to dismiss or minimize the feelings of others, particularly when those feelings don't align with our expectations or understanding. When we dismiss someone's feelings, we invalidate their experience. We're saying your emotions don't matter, or you're overreacting. This kind of response might seem harmless in the moment, but over time, it can create a rift between two people, eroding trust and intimacy. This is especially crucial in relationships with men, who may already struggle to express vulnerability due to societal expectations about masculinity and emotional expression. Why dismissing feelings happens. There are many reasons why someone might dismiss another's emotions, but they often stem from a desire to avoid discomfort. We might do it because we feel uncomfortable with the intensity of someone's emotions, or because we don't know how to respond. We might also dismiss feelings because we don't understand them, or because we're afraid of conflict. Sometimes people dismiss feelings out of impatience, wanting to move past the emotional discomfort as quickly as possible. In other cases, it may be rooted in a lack of empathy or a belief that emotional expressions are a sign of weakness. But no matter the reason, dismissing feelings sends a message you're not worth listening to, or your feelings don't matter. The impact of dismissing his feelings. When someone's feelings are dismissed, it can create a deep sense of isolation. Imagine this: you're feeling something intensely, whether it's frustration, sadness, anger, or joy, and when you express it, instead of being heard, you're told to calm down or it's not that big of a deal. The immediate result is that you feel misunderstood, unsupported, and disconnected. Over time, this can lead to emotional withdrawal. For men, this dynamic can be particularly painful. Society often teaches men to suppress emotions, especially ones like sadness, fear, or vulnerability. When their feelings are dismissed, it can reinforce the idea that showing emotions is wrong or that their emotional needs are unimportant. This is dangerous because it compounds the cycle of emotional suppression, which can lead to greater stress, anger, and even isolation without the power of validation. So what should we do instead? We should strive to validate his feelings. Validation isn't about agreeing with everything he says or does. It's about acknowledging his experience as real and worthy of respect. Validation is the act of saying, I see you, I hear you, and I understand that you feel this way. For instance, if he's upset about something, rather than dismissing his frustration with comments like, it's not a big deal, or you're overreacting, try saying something like, I can see that you're really upset right now. Let's talk about it. This doesn't mean solving the problem immediately. It simply means offering him the space to feel heard and understood. Why validation is crucial. When we validate someone's feelings, we are giving them permission to be authentic. We're saying, it's okay to feel what you're feeling, and it's okay to express that to me. This fosters emotional safety and intimacy. It allows both partners to show up fully without fear of judgment or rejection. Validation is a cornerstone of emotional intimacy. When both people in a relationship feel seen and heard, trust flourishes. Emotional intimacy doesn't require perfection. It simply requires a willingness to listen and validate one another's experiences. The difference between validation and agreement. It's important to note that validating someone's feelings doesn't mean you have to agree with them. You can validate his feelings without necessarily agreeing with his actions or conclusions. For example, if he's angry about a situation, you don't have to agree that he's right to be angry, but you can validate the fact that he feels angry. This distinction is important because it allows you to show empathy without sacrificing your own perspective. You can hold space for his emotions while also expressing your own thoughts or concerns. This creates a dynamic of healthy dialogue where both people feel respected and valued. Avoiding common pitfalls. A common response to someone expressing emotions is to jump into problem-solving mode. While it's natural to want to fix things, sometimes what people need most is not a solution, but a listening ear. Before jumping to action, ask yourself, is he asking for advice, or is he simply looking to be heard? It's also essential to avoid minimizing his feelings. Phrases like, it could be worse, or don't worry about it, might seem comforting on the surface, but they undermine the depth of what the person is experiencing. Instead of minimizing, try to empathize. Let him know that his emotions are legitimate, regardless of whether they seem rational to you. Empathy over sympathy. There's a big difference between empathy and sympathy. Sympathy often comes from a place of pity, whereas empathy comes from understanding. Empathy involves connecting with the feelings of the other person, not just feeling sorry for them. You don't have to have experienced exactly what they're going through to empathize. You just need to be present and willing to listen. It's building emotional safety. When we stop dismissing someone's feelings and start validating them, we build a space where both people feel safe to be themselves. This emotional safety is the bedrock of a healthy relationship. It encourages honest, open communication, deepens emotional intimacy, and helps both partners feel respected and cared for. Closing thought. Don't dismiss his feelings. Don't tell him to get over it or calm down. Instead, listen, validate, empathize. By doing so, you are not only showing him that his emotions matter, but you are also cultivating the kind of relationship where both partners feel seen, heard, and valued. And in a world that often pushes us to hide our vulnerabilities, that's a gift worth giving. At the heart of any healthy, authentic relationship is trust, transparency, and open communication. Emotional games, on the other hand, introduce manipulation, confusion, and dishonesty into the equation. Playing emotional games is one of the most damaging behaviors in relationships, whether consciously or unconsciously, and it can destroy the very foundation of connection. Emotional games might look different for everyone, but at their core, they involve using emotional tactics to get a desired response from someone, whether that's attention, validation, control, or reassurance. Instead of communicating openly and directly, people may resort to passive-aggressive behavior, silent treatment, guilt tripping, playing hard to get, or even testing a partner's loyalty or commitment through indirect means. These behaviors are often rooted in insecurity or fear, and while they might yield temporary results, they ultimately erode trust and undermine intimacy. What do emotional games look like? The silent treatment. One of the most common emotional games is the silent treatment. This is when someone deliberately withholds communication as a form of punishment or manipulation. Instead of addressing a conflict openly, the person shuts down, leaving the other person to guess what's wrong. This creates unnecessary tension and leaves both partners in a state of emotional limbo, unsure of where they stand. The silent treatment is harmful because it's rooted in avoidance, not resolution. Playing hard to get. Another form of emotional game playing is playing hard to get. While some may argue that this tactic adds excitement to the relationship, it actually fosters confusion and insecurity. Playing hard to get means withholding affection, attention, or communication in a strategic way to manipulate the other person into wanting you more. Instead of building trust and emotional connection, it leads to uncertainty and feelings of inadequacy. In the long run, it makes the relationship feel transactional, like it's a game to be won or lost. Testing loyalty. Testing loyalty involves creating situations where you intentionally provoke a reaction to test how committed someone is to you. This could look like fishing for reassurance with comments like, "You wouldn't leave me, would you?" Or even creating situations that make your partner jealous to see how they react. These games introduce unnecessary drama into the relationship and are often rooted in a lack of trust. They also signal that you're not comfortable with vulnerability or honest communication. Guilt tripping. Guilt tripping is a powerful yet destructive emotional game. This is when someone uses guilt to manipulate another into doing something or acting a certain way. For example, if you really loved me, you would do this for me, or I can't believe you don't care enough to. These kinds of statements not only make the other person feel responsible for the emotions of the first person, but they also create an unhealthy dynamic where love and affection are used as currency. Withholding affection or attention. Withholding affection or attention as a form of punishment or leverage is another emotional game that undermines a relationship. When someone withholds love or support, they're often trying to elicit a specific response, like asking for more attention, appreciation, or compliance. But this strategy only leads to emotional distress and creates a barrier between the partners, making it harder to communicate effectively or feel emotionally secure. The consequences of playing emotional games. Playing emotional games may feel like a way to maintain control or get your needs met in the short term, but the long-term effects are devastating. Here are some of the consequences. Erosion of trust. Trust is the foundation of any strong relationship. Emotional games are inherently dishonest because they involve manipulation and hidden agendas. When trust is eroded, it becomes nearly impossible to feel safe in a relationship, which makes vulnerability and authentic communication harder. Insecurity and anxiety. Emotional games often provoke feelings of insecurity and anxiety in both partners. The person on the receiving end of manipulation may feel confused, unsure of where they stand, or constantly walking on eggshells. Over time, this builds an unhealthy pattern where both people feel disconnected and emotionally distant. Emotional exhaustion. Playing emotional games requires constant mental and emotional effort to strategize, manipulate, and react in specific ways. This creates emotional exhaustion, leaving both partners drained and mentally fatigued. Instead of growing together, you're focused on surviving the emotional roller coaster that game playing creates. Resentment and frustration. The longer emotional games go on, the more resentment builds. The person who feels manipulated may begin to resent their partner for not being open or straightforward, while the person playing the games may feel frustrated by the lack of control. This resentment can undermine the affection and mutual respect that are essential for a healthy relationship. Lack of authenticity. Relationships thrive on authenticity. Emotional games prevent genuine connection, because both partners are operating from a place of strategy instead of sincerity. Instead of being your true self, you're hiding behind masks, pretending to be something you're not, or withholding aspects of who you really are. This lack of authenticity breeds disconnection. Why do people play emotional games? Emotional games are often rooted in fear or insecurity. A person might play games because they're afraid of rejection, abandonment, or not being loved. Sometimes it's because they've never been taught how to communicate their feelings openly, so they resort to manipulative tactics to get what they need. There's also a cultural aspect to consider. Society often teaches us that relationships are a battleground where power dynamics are at play, and winning means getting your way. In reality, healthy relationships aren't about winning or losing, they're about growing and learning together. How to avoid emotional games. The antidote to emotional games is emotional maturity. Here's how to cultivate it. Be honest and direct. Instead of resorting to passive-aggressive comments or indirect tactics, practice honesty and direct communication. If something bothers you, say it clearly. If you need something, ask for it openly. Being vulnerable and honest helps build a deeper connection and eliminates the need for games. Set healthy boundaries. Emotional gains often happen when boundaries aren't clear. Setting boundaries means knowing what you're willing to tolerate in a relationship and what you're not. When you're clear about your own needs and communicate them respectfully, it reduces the temptation to play games for power or control. Cultivate emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence involves understanding your own emotions and being attuned to the emotions of others. It's about managing your feelings in a healthy way and responding to others' emotions with empathy and care. When both partners have high emotional intelligence, it creates a foundation of respect and mutual understanding, making emotional gains unnecessary. Trust your partner. Trust is key in any relationship. Instead of testing your partner's loyalty or commitment through games, cultivate a foundation of trust where both partners feel secure and confident in each other's intentions. Practice empathy. Empathy means putting yourself in your partner's shoes and trying to understand their perspective. When you approach each situation with empathy, you'll be less likely to resort to emotional manipulation or games. Closing thought. Relationships are at their best when they're built on authenticity, mutual respect, and open communication. Emotional gains only serve to create confusion, resentment, and distance. The healthiest relationships thrive on honesty and vulnerability where both partners feel safe to be their true selves. By avoiding emotional games, we allow love to grow in its most genuine form. And in the end, that's what we all want. A relationship that feels real, grounded, and full of trust.in. Conclusion. The foundation of any strong and lasting relationship is built on respect, trust, communication, and understanding. By avoiding emotional games, not dismissing feelings, respecting boundaries, and refraining from trying to change one another, we open the door to a deeper, more authentic connection. Relationships are not about manipulation or playing roles. They are about being present, vulnerable, and honest with each other. When we choose to love and relate with integrity, we create a space where both partners can grow, feel heard, and be their truest selves. And in that space, love isn't a game to be won or lost, but a partnership to be nurtured and cherished. So let's commit to showing up with open hearts, clear communication, and an unwavering respect for the people we love. When we do that, we build not just relationships, but a foundation for mutual growth, trust, and deep connection. Thank you.